Hello everybody, this is AK. I'm back bringing you another weekend video. This is the first day of September, right? The last month of this quarter. And I want to take some time to talk to myself about some chatter that has been going on in the investment community, right? There has been some noise about how we should be selling our investments in the local banks, right? Selling stocks of DBS, OCBC, and UOB, and using the money to buy REITs, real estate investment trusts, right? So I use the word noise not in a negative sense, right? I mean, I'm part of the noise on the internet, right? So it's just that there's some chatter going around, right, going on about how we should be selling stocks in the banks and buying into REITs, and this is a good time. And why? Because the Fed is expected to cut interest rate this month, right? And they are also expected to have another one or two rate cuts before the year ends, and maybe next year we'll see another 2 or 3 interest rates cuts. And all this is because Jerome Powell seems to have a change of heart, and he seems to think that they have brought inflation down to a manageable level, and that inflation has been tamed. There are also signs that the American economy is cooling down because unemployment has gone up. So I think it's a tricky position. I mean, he has a tough job, right? Trying to make sure that the economy doesn't go into recession and trying to make sure that inflation doesn't come back stronger, right? So he seems to think that inflation is under control. So I'll expect rate cuts, right? And of course, people are all very excited, especially people who are heavily invested in REITs or who like REITs very much. They think that the interest rates being cut means that REITs are going to do much better, right? So if we just look at that statement and say, hey, it makes sense, right? Interest rates come down, REITs will do better because REITs borrow money, right, to buy buildings and to fund their operations. So if interest rates come down, then their cost of doing business will be lower. Specifically, their borrowing costs will become lower, right? And people ask, AK, you made a lot of money investing in REITs in the last 15 years or more, last 2 decades. What do you think? Do you think we should be selling our investments in banks and buying more REITs? And I like to remind people that I made a lot of money investing in REITs. And I'm really reminding people, I'm not just talking to myself, because this is an important point to make. I made a lot of money during the 15 years after the global financial crisis, right? Because the 15 years after the global financial crisis, we saw a very long period of zero interest, or interest rate at zero or close to zero, or even negative in some countries, right? So it means that money was free, virtually free, you could borrow at very low cost, no cost, and people were encouraged to take risk, right? So risk assets did very well during those 15 years, and REITs, REITs, real estate investment trusts, well, they are risk assets. So they did very well in those 15 years as well, and I made a lot of money during those 15 years. And I shared in one of my videos and blog posts that I made probably more than $1.5 million investing in REITs during those years, right? And now fast forward to today, where we have interest rates at Fed rate as what 5.5%, right, compared to almost 0% in those 15 years. How many rate cuts must we get before we go back to where we were during those 15 years? That is a question that people don't ask, right? They just assume that interest rates get cut, REITs will do better, right? Yes, of course they will do better. They'll feel less pressure, right? Less financial pressure. There's some relief, right? But they will still be refinancing or experiencing a higher interest rate environment, right? So let's say that 3 rate cuts this year, 3 rate cuts next year, and let's say it's always 0.25% per cut. That would be 1.5% in total. You bring us down from 5.5 to 4%. 4%. It's still much higher than almost 0% in those 15 years, right? So the cost of doing business, the financing cost, the borrowing cost will still be higher than in those 15 years, right? So no doubt rate cuts are good for REITs, but I do not think REITs will fly or do way much better just because of these rate cuts we're expecting for the rest of this year and next year, right? And I don't think the Fed will go back to 0% interest rate policy or close to 0% unless there is a huge depression or very bad recession at least. What I've said so far, there's point number 1 and point number 2, right, on the screen, right? So now point number 3, there's Buffett, right? That's Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett sold a big chunk of his investments in Bank of America, which he said before in past interviews that he liked very much, right? So we always see Warren Buffett also selling his investment in Bank of America, but then we have to ask the second question: is he buying REITs? Not that I know of. I don't think he's selling Bank of America shares to buy units in REITs. I don't think so. So that's half the argument, right? So what is AK saying? So REITs are bad. Basket case. I didn't say that. I would never say that. I think REITs, I've always said REITs are relevant, pertinent considerations when we are investing for income, right? But just not at this moment. I don't think so, right? Why? That's point number 4. It's relative, right? Relative to what banks bring to the table. I think REITs are not as attractive an investment to me at the moment. Right, they pay out 90 to 100% of their income in order to achieve the kind of yield that they achieve for shareholders, right? And people always refer it to as dividend, but really it's income distribution, right? So it's distribution yield, is not dividend yield. They distribute almost all of their cash flow to shareholders. They retain nothing. Right, so then you compare that to the banks, DBS, OCBC, and UOB. They distribute 50 to 60% of their earnings. They retain half of their earnings, and they grow more valuable over time. Right, they grow more valuable over time, and by just doing that, they're able to offer 5 to 6% dividend yield. So if you think of the banks, and if you think they were to distribute all their income, the yield will be much higher than what REITs are offering, right? So, I mean, relatively speaking, I still find the banks more attractive today. But still, REITs are decent enough investment. I just think they're not as attractive as what the banks are offering investors now. Okay, just my opinion. Okay, you don't have to agree with me. And but I like to go back to the point I made in the past, and that's all investments are good investments at the right price. And older readers of my blog will remember that I got into REITs in a big way during the global financial crisis. Rock bottom bargain basement prices, and then followed by 15 years of very low interest rates. How not to do well? how not to do well. So I mean, look at AIMS APAC REIT, for example, which I got in during the global financial crisis. My yield on cost today is easily 10% or more than 10%. Right, my yield on cost today is so I keep telling people that it's a free of cost investment to me, and it's still paying me, right? But notice it isn't growing. It isn't growing because it doesn't retain any earnings. It just pays out everything year after year, and it's not growing, right? But you think of it as a fixed deposit. It has been very rewarding, very good. Which fixed deposit pays 10% per annum, right? I'm just saying it. Just saying. Of course, it's not fixed deposits. So when would I buy a lot more REITs? Well, think of the conditions during the global financial crisis. Think of the very low interest rates environment, almost 0%. Those are conditions very benign for REITs, right? So when people ask me about when I'm going to buy more, well, just think about those conditions. And when the stars are aligned, well, that's when I'll buy a lot more, right? That's when I'll buy a lot more. So then what's the number that I shared on screen, right? $71,333. That's not what I invested in REITs recently. That's my passive income for the months of July and August, right? The first 2 months of the third quarter of 2024. Right, and some of the money will be spent, and some of the money I'll be giving away as ang paos to my family, and most of it I will be saving, right? So it's like Warren Buffett, right? Point number 3, I say, he sold his shares, big chunk of his shares in Bank of America. And of course, we know that he also sold a big chunk of his investment in Apple, and he's just hoarding cash, right? And I think hoarding cash isn't a bad option right now. There will be opportunities to buy at cheaper prices, I'm very sure. It's just a matter of when, and when that happens, I want to be ready, right? So if AK can do it, so can you. Bye-bye.